I want to introduce a speaker. She's emceeing the pitch for us today. And before she does that, she's going to talk a little bit to you all. Her name is Ruma Bose. She is a humanitarian and entrepreneur and champion for female leadership. She built and ran the Chobani Foundation. She is the best-selling author of Mother Teresa, CEO, who happened to be a mentor to her as a teenager and pen pal. So, I mean, I'm blown away. So welcome, Ruma Bose, and then we'll follow up with the pitch from there. Come on out.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Thank you so much for that kind introduction. It really is such an honor to be here today. I always find it amazing that no matter where you are in the world, when you have a room full of creative, talented, successful, amazing women, just magic happens. And I can just feel the energy on stage. So bravo, She Knows and BlogHer for creating this incredible platform to bring together these women to connect and dialogue and just celebrate each other. I think it's awesome. So I just came back from a week in Mexico and in Canada. And what was clear to me on both those trips was how much female greatness and talent as entrepreneurs exist in the world. Yet the popular image of entrepreneurs today is still that of a man. In Canada, we did this research where we asked Canadians who are the most famous entrepreneurs in Canada and who are the most famous entrepreneurs in the world. And the results were really shocking to me. What we found were the greatest Canadian entrepreneurs were mostly dead, white, older men. And the greatest entrepreneurs in the world were still living, but still all men. And what we said with this is that it's time to do something about it. And the face of entrepreneurship needs to change, and that face needs to be female. And so one of the things that I encourage all of you to do is to keep telling your stories, because we need to celebrate women and we need to create role models, because role models matter. When I was a kid growing up in a very small town in Canada, I didn't have any entrepreneurial role models. But what I did have were stories. And my mom used to tell me these bedtime stories about this saint living in India who was doing all these magical things. And then one day I saw a homeless person going through our garbage, and I didn't understand why that was happening. I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. So I asked my mom. And when she gave me an explanation that didn't make any sense to me, I decided to write a letter to this saint in India and ask her what I could do. So I wrote this letter, I put it in an envelope, I wrote Mother Teresa, Calcutta, India, and I sent it off. And the most surprising thing is, 2 months later, I got a response. And what Mother Teresa told me was that poor people are beautiful people, and they're not looking for our pity or our judgment, but our love and our respect. And what you can do to help this person is smile. Because the more you smile, the more love you spread. And that is what we all need to do. And so that started a relationship, if I can call it that, at a very young age. And she taught me my first lasting truth, which is pay attention. Pay attention to your families. Pay attention to your employees, pay attention to your customers, pay attention to yourself. Because if we do that and we show the love for those around us, magic, absolute magic happens. So as time went on, I was in college, sitting in my dorm room. I just learned about how half the world lives on under $1 a day. And that seemed incredibly unfair. I felt very helpless, and I felt very disillusioned with college. So I decided in that moment that I've been wanting to meet this mentor, saint, friend, pen pal of mine for the longest time, and so I decided to pack my bags and venture off to India. I'd love to share with you very briefly what that first week was like when I arrived in Calcutta. I was volunteering in a home for dying people because Mother Teresa believed that everyone should die with dignity. And the simple message she gave us is that when you work in a home with the elderly and you work in a home for dying, the only rule she had is do not judge, just love. Now that seems simple enough until you're faced with a situation that can be very trying. So on my first day, this woman walks in. She was probably in her mid to late 60s. Her back was hunched up, and she looked like someone who probably hadn't had 3 meals a day for the last decade. We brought her in. I bathed her, I fed her, I brought her into her cot. And I remembered that I had a lipstick in my pocket. So I took the lipstick out and I put it on her, and I ran to get the mirror to show her. And the most amazing thing happened. She sat up, her back was straight, she looked at herself, likely for the first time, and she smiled. So I felt so good about myself in that moment. And then a second goes by, and she closed her eyes, and she died. Now, I share this story because when I look back at that moment, I think about it from a leadership perspective. Was that the right thing to do? To send a person who had no experience into a sink or swim situation where I could have been traumatized for life and on the first flight back home. But what happened instead was transformational, because I learned to face my fears, to have the courage to walk through that fear and emerge on the other side, a much stronger person, knowing that I actually did make a difference in this woman's life. I'm not afraid of death, and I can do anything I set my mind to. And the lesson that taught me was the importance of taking risks, and the importance of facing your fears, and the importance of doing the things that you want to do in your life. So, thank you. So I ended up spending a year with Mother Teresa. And in the end, she taught me some of the greatest lessons in my life. The first, aim as high as possible. Dream, and dream big, because there's nothing that you can't do in your life. 2, never settle. Never settle, never give up. Keep your tenacity, follow your dreams, follow your path, and do what you need to do to get to the next milestone. And 3rd, never think that you're done. None of us are done. We're never done. There's always work to do. There's always a higher milestone to achieve. There's always more that we can do in our lives to make our lives better. And through her example, she taught me that all of us are our best when we help other people become their best. Because what Mother Teresa did was create leaders around her. She was one of the most incredible mentors anyone could ever have. Now, when I came back from India, I pursued an education in business and ended up becoming an entrepreneur. And 20 years later, as I thought about who were my greatest role models when it came to entrepreneurship, I realized it was Mother Teresa. And for many, that's very surprising. But if you think about her life story and her journey, I don't know anyone in the private sector who has her track record. So she had a simple vision of wanting to help the poorest of the poor. She left the organization she was with, which was the Sisters of Loretto, and she fought the Catholic Church to start a new religious order. She recruited 12 nuns, and then she opened a small school in the slums of Calcutta. She spent the next 5 years building that school to capacity and adding different services. And then in her 6th year, she scaled nationally across India. And in her 11th year, she opened her first international location in Venezuela. At the time of her death, she had over 600 missions in over 100 countries with over 1 million people working with her. She raised and deployed over $1 billion in capital. She was a fundraising machine. She was a PR magnet. And even though she's been gone for over 15 years, her organization still continues to grow 10, 15% per year, year over year. Now, what's fascinating is that she was the leader of her organization through every phase of growth, from startup to multinational. And that's not something that you see very often. And when I look at that track record, I tell myself, this is not about being a saint. This is executive excellence, and one that should be admired, celebrated, and emulated. So I want to talk about one piece of her greatness, which I think is relevant to all of us. There are hundreds of thousands of missionaries all around the world doing incredible work. Why is it that Mother Teresa was the one person, no matter where you are in the world, that we had all heard of? And the reason is because she knew how to use the power of the media. She knew how to tell her story and get others to tell her story consistently over and over and over again. I am absolutely convinced that if Mother Teresa were alive today, she would be a blogger, a prolific Twitter user, and she'd send her message out in the world. And if you look at her from a branding perspective, you may or may not agree with her values and what she did, but everyone knows what she stood for, and everyone knew what her brand was by the way that she spoke, by the way that she dressed, by the things that she did, and every story that was written about her was always the same. Tragedy happens, Mother Teresa saves the day. So that power of media and the power of storytelling is truly one that is incredible. So when I talk about her journey, what was it that made her so successful? I go back to the lessons I learned in the beginning. She aimed high. She helped everyone around her be the best that she could be. She never settled, and she never gave up. She gave others, especially people like me, to have the courage to take risks in life, to dream big, and to think differently. And she did that with the example of her own life. And before we bring in these incredible entrepreneurs, my last message to you is we all have the power to be the Mother Teresa of something. And it starts with a simple vision and aim high, be a role model, mentor others, never settle, never think that you're done, have the courage to take big steps and take risks and do something for yourself, and trust yourself. Because this is what will lead you to the kind of success and the kind of leadership that change lives, that change communities, it changes families, it changes countries. None of you are done yet. None of us are done yet. And I deeply believe that all of you have the ingredients to be as great as you choose to be. But greatness isn't just defined by what you do in the world. It is equally defined by what you do for the world. So go out there and be an example for yourselves. Be the person that you wish you had in your lives. Tell your stories. Tell other people's stories. Celebrate women. And with that, we will achieve greatness with each other together.